Hey guys, welcome to today's podcast episode. Today we're joined with Mr. Gavin McHale. Thank you so much for jumping on board and joining us. Just before we start, I wanted to just give a little bit of context. Gavin, I remember being a part of the same program together about 12 to 18 months ago, and he's helped me a lot in terms of getting out of my own head, a lot of mental ruts and obstacles I went through. And I remember the calls we had, I walked away with a lot of perspective and a lot of kind of beliefs almost unlocked, whereas I kind of almost feel like I always had more confidence and self-belief after calls and just seeing things differently. So never had a chance to properly thank you, dude. So thank you so much, and thank you for jumping on board today.
It means a lot, and nothing better than doing it in public. So thank you for that. And I hope that, I know you've structured it in a way that hopefully we can provide those unlocks for people listening. But I think that's really the thing that a lot of us need, a lot of entrepreneurs need is a little bit of belief, a little bit of reframing of perspective, and hopefully we can do that. So thanks, man.
Amazing. And then I guess the first one for people kind of tuning in now is could you give us a bit of a breakdown in terms of who you are, what you do? I know you've done a lot of cool stuff over the last few years as well with the book and stuff we'll touch on, but who is Gavin? What do you do? And we can pick it up from there.
Yeah. How much time do you have? I'll give you a rundown. I think my story really does resonate in terms of why I am where I am and how I'm able to be successful. If you go way back, I'm a Canadian kid, so of course I played hockey. I was a goalie, and I was getting pretty close to what I thought was my dream. I wanted to play pro hockey, and I was the next step away, playing junior hockey thousands of miles away from home. I was 17, 18 years old. And I couldn't explain it at the time, and I didn't really speak it until recently, but I was so scared. I was so scared of everything that came with the success I thought I wanted. I was so scared of failure. I was so scared of making mistakes. But none of that was really conscious. And so it consciously kind of came out in me, really orchestrating this complete meltdown and blowing my chance at playing professional hockey. That pattern kind of kept repeating over the years. I went to school, became a personal trainer, and as I was trying to grow an online business, before online businesses were cool, by the way, as I was trying to do that, I was noticing these kind of same patterns of I'll just go back to this mediocre, easy thing, and I'll just avoid the hard work. I'll avoid potential failure. I was super scared of failing and letting people down. And it wasn't until a coach really challenged me and said, you need to look in the mirror. This is all between your ears. This is all your mindset, that I really dug in. And that's when everything shifted for me, when I started to dig into my own stories, dig into my own narratives, my own identity, how I thought the world worked. And when I realized none of these things are serving what I want. None of these things are, we all set these goals, right? I'm sure everyone listening has big goals, and then they struggle to reach them. And that's because the conscious goal and the subconscious beliefs and narrative are out of alignment. So you're never going to be able to do it, and it's always going to feel really hard. And that's what I noticed. And then I started teaching this to friends and clients and people who wanted the same things I wanted, and started realizing that no matter what level people are at, they've all got these stories that are holding them back. So it kind of became this thing where 5-6 years ago, I probably would have laughed in my own face at a lot of the things I say and do, because I was so on the other side of it. Then, when it started to shift, I think that the full 180 is what allows me, because I can recognize where people are coming from, even if they're totally new to this stuff.
And I guess on that as well, if you don't mind me asking, what would you say were some of the stories or beliefs or patterns you started to first shift, going from the personal trainer, from the hockey player towards transitioning? What did you find, and how did you kind of start to question it? Because I love one of the things you mentioned, the Carl Jung kind of, butcher the actual quote, but it's unless you make the unconscious conscious, you're never really going to be able to change it. And I've butchered the quote completely, but
it was close. Yeah.
I really like that perspective, and I really like that kind of analogy. And I guess I was just wondering, like, what are some of the stories, and how did you start to change your mindset to grow? I guess.
Man, the stories were aplenty. And the quote, I know it well because it's an epigraph in my book, is until you make the unconscious conscious, and this is where it's really important, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And I think so many people are like, well, I guess this is just the way it is. I guess this is just like, I guess that's just not meant for me. Right. And I think that was one of the big beliefs that came for me was, I'm sure so many of us listening are like me, money doesn't grow on trees. It's really hard to make money. You got to work really hard. You got to sacrifice, maybe even sacrifice your family. And when we believe those things, our brain, does everything it can to align with that and make those true. And so I'll just back up a little bit and tell you about the way the brain works, and then I can go a little more into my stories. So we have our subconscious brain, which is like 95 to 98% of our brain. And then we have our conscious brain, which is where we set all our goals and all that stuff, which is 2 to 5%. Well, the connection between those two is called the reticular activating system. And everybody's heard like the red car theory. If I go say, go look for red cars, you'll find them. Well, what our reticular activating system does is if I believe that money is really hard to make and I believe that I have to sacrifice everything to make lots of money, then my reticular activating system is going to look for evidence that agrees with that. And then that evidence is going to further ingrain that belief. And it's this nasty spiral unless we're really careful about making the unconscious conscious. So I believed that I had to, sacrifice everything. I believed that failure meant that I was a failure. Like if I failed or made a mistake, it meant that I was a failure. My character was questioned because my identity was so tied into like my performance in hockey and my external validation. And then one other thing, like along with the money beliefs was I had these like really negative beliefs about wealthy people, right? I was brought up middle class, and nothing against my parents, but like the society and the people that I spent time with ingrained in me like that rich people are bad in some way. Rich people screw people over. Rich people are cheap. Rich people are not generous. Rich people probably, a lot of people hate them. And like all these things were like, I didn't want any of those, although I wanted to be rich, right? So it was all out of alignment, right? I have these conscious goals of being rich and being successful and whatever. And then these unconscious, subconscious beliefs are all in direct opposition to that. So I had to start to do the work to align my beliefs with what I wanted.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it's like the thing you mentioned as well is like sacrifice and everything, money beliefs, and like money is bad is kind of like really kind of interesting perspective. And I guess without realizing, like you say, it holds you back a lot. So what would you say are, I guess, some common mindset mistakes or beliefs you maybe see with the people you work with, business owners, or even stuff you hear in person that, or maybe some of the most common ones you see that, I guess, hold people back without realizing?
Yeah, I think the number one issue is this relationship with failure, right? We see all over social media, failure's feedback, blah, 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 blah. But so many of us don't actually change our belief around it. So what happens, I find, with a lot of, I'll call them high performers, right? So whether you're, a business owner who wants to succeed like Plowman and I, or whether you're, somebody who just wants to like look better and like you've invested in a weight loss program or something like that, you're what I would call a high performer. You think differently than most people, right? You want to win. And when we, like, one of the issues with that is we're so freaking hard on ourselves. And when we fail or we make a mistake, right, we believe that means something about us and our character and who we are. And so we judge ourselves and beat ourselves up instead of recognizing that in that failure, in that mistake is the best feedback we could ever get, right? we look at super successful people, right? Like the people who are making millions and splashing it all over social media, right? We look at them and we think they don't fail as much as we do. That's kind of this like weird fallacy that people have when they're looking at wealthy and successful people. In fact, like I would like to call myself relatively successful, and I've worked with people who run 7, 8, multiple 8-figure businesses. They have failed more, far more than people who aren't as successful. What the difference is they don't let that drop them into a valley of despair. They use the failure as feedback to get better quicker and reiterate, because they know that failure is actually a massive part of success. So that's, I think, the biggest issue the biggest difference between those who are not as successful and want to be successful and those who are. And then the other one that I notice a lot is when I do my presentation on money mindset and like, hey, what are the beliefs that were instilled in you about money as a kid? There's so many people, because most of us grew up either lower class or middle class. And there are so many, and even the people who grew up in the upper class have these negative beliefs about money because maybe something did happen, maybe something was negative in their life. And we spin these negative stories about money and being rich and what that means. And basically, if we want to hit our goals, our money goals, we would have to hate ourselves if we didn't change our beliefs, which does not serve anybody.
And I feel you've touched on this already. So you go through the presentations and you go through the money kind of mindset exercise, and people have this, fear of failure or fear of doing more. How do you, people listening to this now, how can they go about kind of challenging this belief and actually changing it? Like, good. Yeah.
So good. And I think, so Plamen, I think this is where, I know you've had other mindset folks on, and I think a lot of mindset people are really good motivational speakers, but they're not great coaches, right? Like they're like, you got to just believe, and you got to change your mindset, and you got to really, it's going to be about changing your identity. And everyone's sitting there going, yeah, man, I feel awesome. And then in a week, they're like, well, what am I supposed to do when that happens? Like, what am I supposed to do? So I think the number one thing people need to recognize is like, this is a learnable skill, and you can change these beliefs, right? These are beliefs. They're not facts. Our brains often make them feel like facts, but they are beliefs. So the first thing I would say is to uncover these is to start getting curious and asking questions. And especially when you find yourself judging yourself, ask some questions about it. Like, what is the story that I'm making up here? Like, what am I telling myself here that might not be true? Right? We start to beat ourselves like, oh, I should be further ahead. Well, really? Is that true? Like, start like questioning these things first of all, because that's where we're going to pull out like what are those statements that I call it the devil on your shoulder, or the voice in your head is screaming at you when things aren't going well. Because that's what happens, right? In the moment, the devil on the shoulder is just like, well, you know what? Just cancel the sales call because you're not good enough anyway. So you're not going to close that person. You suck, right? That's a belief, right? That's not a fact. It's not a fact that you're not good enough. So then actually, and I have this framework that comes from Byron Katie called the 4 questions that I want to get into. But the first thing I often tell people, like, just like logically start asking some questions that will help you recognize that it's ridiculous that you think this, right? Like, so a lot of high performers, especially business owners, think they're not good enough to have the success they want to have, right? Like, I'm not good enough to have $1 million business. I'm not good enough to charge $5,000 or $10,000 for a program. And like, the question I'll ask them is like, define good enough. Like, how will you know? And they're all like, when I sell a $10,000 program. So just sell a $10,000 program then. Right? Like, people, they kind of get spun up in their own head, right? About these things that are vague identifiers, or not even identifiers at all. Like, good enough doesn't really mean anything, right? Then we can go into, once we have this like belief, let's say it's I'm not good enough, or, I need to sacrifice my family to make $1 million or whatever. Then we can ask what Byron Katie called the 4 questions, or the self-inquiry, which is, question one is this true? Like, is it actually true, or is it a belief? If our subconscious is fighting that, we can ask question two, which is it a fact? Like, do you know this to be true without a shadow of a doubt? That will usually squash it, and then we can recognize we can change it. 3 and 4 really shows you what can happen, right? So question 3 is, what happens when I buy into this belief? And that's when we start to realize all these symptoms of this belief. Oh, I procrastinate. I don't do what I should do. I start overthinking, all those things, right? Which is what we would call a self-fulfilling prophecy. As I said before, the reticular activating system is looking for things it wants to align with that negative belief. And then question 4 is, well, what could happen if I chose to change this, right? Like what could happen? Could I make that money? Could I have that? And we start to recognize that anything could happen. Like whatever we want can happen. So then we rework the belief. So then we say, well, what's a new truth that serves you better? Well, maybe instead of I'm not good enough, I'm becoming better every day. Or instead of, I have to sacrifice my family to make money, I can create systems that allow me to make money without sacrificing my family. Like there are ways we can rework these things, and then we just need to look for evidence, because all our subconscious brain needs is evidence, and it's been finding evidence for 10, 20, 30 years that negative belief is true. So we just need to start rewiring that by looking for the new evidence.
And in this case as well, like I actually remember going through those exercises on a live call with yourself, and it was a massive perspective shift. On the evidence side of things, one thing will be interesting to see and hear your perspective on is, I almost find the evidence for business owners, personal trainers, coaches, a lot of the time at the start, kind of myself and a lot of the people I speak to and know, is a lot of the time at the start it's just like just a lot of volume, a lot of hard work, a lot of just trial and error and just sacrifice and everything at the start, making your first 5k or 10k. And then I almost find at that point it's like the next evolution of that is like almost not necessarily giving up the hard work, but just not being being able to find more balance and being able to kind of create time to think. And like what would be interesting perspective is like, what do you see are the biggest trends as you kind of go through different rings of kind of success in business? Like what are the kind of like diary scheduling, or what are the kind of like beliefs, I guess, or kind of thought processes that you find you almost need to go from 0 to your first 10k month, and from 10k to 50 or 50 to 100, like if we could maybe categorize those?
Yeah, 100%. I think if anybody listening is like struggling to hit that, like I kind of call it the covering your bills level, right? Like being able to cover your rent and your like lifestyle. So we could call that anywhere from like 4k to 10k, really, like putting yourself in a comfortable position. You're right. I think it does take, it's like trying to move a boulder uphill, right? Like it does take a lot of effort to get it started. That being said, I think so many people aren't resourceful enough when they're in the early part of their business, and they're sitting here going, yeah, I'm creating all this content and I'm like sending all these cold DMs, and I'm like, why? You got probably 250 people in your phone who know you already. Yeah, Plowman's laughing because he's like, I know, right? And unfortunately, so many business coaches are teaching this, right? Like, okay, you're making no money. Go cold DM people who have no idea who you are, and you have nothing to explain to them why you're good, right? Well, I believe you need to use your resources in people who already know you, like you, and trust and recognize that you're not a serial killer, okay? So that's the first thing. Like, if you are not yet at a place where you're comfortably covering your bills in your business, go get resourceful. Text everybody in your phone. Message everybody on your Facebook or on your social media that you know. Go find people from other worlds, other jobs you had, high school, college, whatever, who know you. And even if they're not interested in working with you, they know other people who likely would be interested in working with you, right? And they would love to hear your story. So I think to reframe even that first few thousand, it's not like, it is harder to get it going. But if you're resourceful, I heard once a great coach say, you can make your first 100K with people who already know you. And I truly believe that. I made my first 100K with people who already knew me, because it's like one person knew me and then they referred 6 other people over the course of 2 years. And so it's kind of like the circles start getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Because everybody has, a partner and maybe kids and friends and all these things who know each other, and they all have friends and they all have, right? So every time you enroll a client, you also now get their access to their 250 to 1,000 people that they know, right? So that's the first thing. And I also think where a lot of people go wrong is, we all start our businesses out of probably some form of like negative emotional space, right? Like either it's like revenge, like I'll show you that I can do this, or like fear that like I don't want to go work a job, like I want to have freedom and stuff. Like it's like some negative emotion. And Alex Hormozy talks about this a lot, is like negative emotions like fear and revenge and anger are like really good fire starters. Right? Like if you think of a bonfire, like they're like the kindling and the gasoline that we kind of like start the fire with, but they burn fast and they burn out. And so we can use that to just go ham and get to 5K or 10K, but then so many people don't recognize the shift there. And that's where I notice a lot of people get stuck. Plowman, do you realize that too?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna like trying to allude to a bit in the previous message. Just like you almost gets you started, you almost need to pivot it and change it.
Yeah, and I've literally stood in front of audiences of 100 people and been talking about this stuff and watched people who I know have built their business on a house of cards, like have built their business on revenge, fear, whatever, like cower and avoid eye contact with me because they're like, if I change this now, it's going to be so difficult. So I'm just going to keep, grabbing, white knuckling this thing and hope that it keeps going. But the fact is that everybody at some point will be faced with a need, a requirement to shift their quote unquote fuel. And I believe that shift, you cannot continue to build a business and build a very successful business on the back of negative emotions or on the back of trying to get away from something. When we get to that place where we're quote unquote comfortable, right? Like I think Plum, I think a lot of the work you do is to get people to a place where they're making more than they need and they're able to put some money away, hopefully able to kind of start seeing it as a bit more of a game. I first of all think that gets really uncomfortable for a lot of people, because I know for me, and I think for you too, we talked about this before, and probably for people listening, like my parents both had good jobs, but it was always paycheck to paycheck. It was always balancing the checkbooks. It was always tight at the end of the month. So when I first made far more money than I needed to live, guess what I did? I frickin' blew it, man. That money was out of my pocket so fast I didn't even barely see it, because it was uncomfortable to have that much more money than I needed, right? I was so excited, and yet I had to go tell my wife that I couldn't pay us because I had spent it all on frickin' who knows what, like a bloated team, this, that, the other, like, oh geez, what was I doing, right? So first of all, getting your beliefs straight about the safety of holding money and having extra money and having savings and all of that. But then also, instead of trying to push away from something, now we need to shift into pulling towards something, pulling towards a bigger mission, a bigger purpose, something greater than ourselves. Because really, this whole thing, as much as we do have ego and we like to, make lots of money and all that, it was never about us. It was never about us. Like when you're in a service-based industry and a service-based business, this business is for other people. It's for the people you're helping. So you have to shift that driver that fuel to what is the bigger purpose here? What are we trying, like, what do we think that we were put on earth to do? Because that's now going to pull you forward towards something bigger instead of constantly trying to push, which is that like scarcity energy and that like really tiring, exhausting energy. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting as well. I imagine for you, like for the people you work with, a lot of business owners probably come in from a place of burnout and stress and anxiety, and like I imagine so much of that is solvable by like changing the focus as you get to a place of kind of, you get your business to an initial place of safety and stability.
And I think a lot of like if we're feeling burnout and you know, exhaustion and all that, is like that self-awareness is huge, right? Like okay, like what, you know, we've probably used these beliefs of like I have to work my ass off and all this stuff to get here, probably used those to our advantage, and now we've kind of like used all that fuel, like it's all literally burnt out, right? Like just like we are. And now we're like, well, what am I going to use? Because the only thing I've known is to just drive harder, push harder, work harder, right? It's that like athlete's mentality, that like, you know, all the bullshit we see online that's like, oh, you know, more, work harder, push harder, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's great for like the first little bit. And then it's like, do you really want to be sending 150 cold DMs every day for the rest of your life? No, thank you. Like, I'd rather not. Thanks.
And I guess one that kind of actionable bit here and piece here as well is like on the burnout side of things and kind of experiencing and feeling that, like what would you say are the self-aware, like, and I think it's going to be a hard one to contextualize in a podcast format, but when would you be able to, or you have someone come to you and say, Gavin, like, am I burnt out? Do I need to take time off? Or am I just being too lazy or too
a puss?
Yeah, effectively.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I think a lot of times burnout is like kind of this catch-all term that we use, but I think burnout really at its core is when we are acting out of alignment with what we truly want, right? So let's think about, let's look at the program that you were in that I used to work for, that I no longer work for. We won't name it, but we'll look at it, right? A lot of all of us, I mean, nobody starts a business because they want to work 12-hour days and be exhausted. Like that, like there's way easier ways to make money than start a business, right? So we start a business because of the freedom that it brings us, right? Like, or the freedom that we think it's going to bring us, right? Like that's why we start a business. But I think burnout comes when we start to recognize, or we are applying principles that are kind of keeping us handcuffed, right? Like constantly. So we look at some of these business coaching programs that are like, hey, you need to like constantly be marketing and constantly be selling, right? Like that's never, you know, that's the only way to keep growing. Well, if I have to constantly be creating content, constantly be DMing people, and constantly be selling more, and every time the first of the month hits, I start at zero again, I am like by definition going to burn out, because now I have built a machine that requires me and handcuffs me to it to keep it moving in the way that I have been taught to keep it moving, right? So that is inevitably going to bring burnout, because I have created a system to bring the burnout on. So I think that the burnout isn't always like everybody that you work with and everybody that I work with, like they're hard workers. There's no problem with them working harder. That's never the problem. They get burnt out because they're doing too much stuff that's out of alignment with where they want to go. And their subconscious brain, that 95 to 98% is going, what the hell are you doing? this sucks. This is no fun at all. Right. And like, why don't we just go get a 9-to-5, go become an electrician? Because that's going to be easier to make the same amount of money. Right. So I think that's the burnout piece. And we need to like figure out, okay, what is the misalignment that is leading to this burnout? Then we can fix it.
Yeah. And I relate to that a lot as well, because I've done the exact things you've mentioned here, where
Same.
the first of every month, I've done it, and I've fallen into the habit of, or into the habit in the past of, taking my revenue, dividing and having like weekly projections, daily projections, and having it all very monetary based. And like, I was just like it. I felt like you lose the people skills, and you lose the relationship piece, and you lose the fun out of it.
Yeah.
Is it a matter of, for people listening, is it a matter of finding what your personality type is? Like, if you're a numbers guy or girl, to go heavy on that if it doesn't burn you out? Or is it a matter of kind of how do you structure that business and that piece to have your day and your week to be aligned and actually feel kind of like excited to work and excited to be in a business, and not actually have that constantly back and forth between working hard, burning out, working hard, burning out kind of thing?
Yeah. I hate to like oversimplify this with like a very popular but I think not great book, is like Start With Why, like by Simon Sinek. Like it's such a good idea, but like don't go read the book, everybody. Just read the title. That's the book, right? Start With Why. So what are we talking about? Well, I think a lot of people need to ask some very real questions of themselves, like, why am I doing this, and what am I hoping this will bring? And I think a lot of times, right, say we set these financial goals. Like, the easiest goal to set is financial, right? We all love a scoreboard. Like, let's go look at the scoreboard, and there's nothing else that we can scoreboard in life or in business than money. Like, it's the easiest thing to scoreboard, right? But like, I'll often ask people, so I'm doing this webinar that you're coming to, this workshop in a couple of days, and I'll ask people like, okay, let's talk about your goal, and they'll all set these monetary goals, and then I'll just be like, okay, most important question, why? And they're like, I don't know. Like, why are we doing this? And I think a lot of times we forget that. Like, we forget why we're doing it. And then we also like need to, as my coach calls it, we need to set the rules of the game. Like, what are you not willing to sacrifice for that? So like, for example, he said to us, and it really hit me when we were setting our vision for 2025. He's like, so if you, let's say your goal is $1 million in 2025. So if you hit $1 million, but your wife serves you with divorce papers on December 31st, did you win? Nope. If you hit $1 million, but your kid doesn't even know who you are when you walk through the door because you were never home, did you win? No. Right? You need to set the rules of the game as to what you are and are not willing to sacrifice. And then we need to recognize like the bigger picture as to why we are doing this. Now, most people are doing this, and they all give us the same line. Plowman, you probably hear this all the time. Financial freedom. I want financial freedom. What the hell does that mean? Your client needs to be able to tell you, or the person owning the business needs to be able to tell you what financial freedom means to them. Because it's going to mean something different to me. It's going to mean something different to you. It's going to mean something different to them. And it's going to be all different numbers based on where we live, based on how old we are, based on our family situation. We need to get really clear on these things, because when it's super clear, as another mentor of mine, Craig Ballantyne, says, values and vision drive every decision. When our values are clear, when it's clear what we want and why we want it, the decisions become way easier. Every decision becomes way easier because we have a compass, we have a North Star, we have a decision-making compass that gives us the guidance every single time. And I think I might have gone off track on what the question was, but that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That here as well as an exercise and a takeaway is massive in terms of just being able to almost sit somewhere kind of quiet, far away, and just kind of actually get clear on those, because the easiest thing, like you say, is writing the numbers of the goals. And I think it's another great book. It might be somewhere out here, Simon Sinek's like Infinite Game and Money, and kind of like,
so good.
You know, like if you're doing 12-month revenue goals, or if you're here for the long term, there's massive power in that. I guess one thing that I almost wanted to just dial back a touch is the kind of 4 to 10K kind of business owner chasing a goal. And one thing I laughed when you said that, because I was that guy at 16, 17. I was posting content. I was doing, like, I had an email list with 30 people on it, and I was trying to do that. And one thing that automatically like raised a light bulb in my head is like the reason I was doing that wasn't necessarily like for two reasons. One was because I wanted to build a business, but the second one is because I had that fear of messaging people I knew, and I had that fear of being rejected by people I knew, and kind of that sales kind of touch point, I guess. And what would you say to people similar? Because I get that quite a lot in terms of coaches, personal trainers, that like, I'd rather take the route that is less likely to get me rejected or less likely to get me. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, if I'm to kind of almost bring it back down. It's like fear of rejection and fear of doing stuff that they might look stupid for doing per se.
Well, let me first preface this by saying I am one of the worst for fear of rejection. Okay. I have also, like, I think I've built a personality that makes me likable because of that, because I'm afraid of it. Like, I can still remember 7th grade, getting left out, being rejected by the cool kids, being rejected by the girls, right? Like, I still remember that. And I think a lot of us remember, like, there's no worse feeling than being rejected. Now, one of the things we have to understand, though, is like, let me frame it this way, first of all, before we get on to like the gnarliness of people who know us. We often think that, like, and if you're not on video, I'll explain this in a way you can understand if you're listening. We often think we're in the middle, and yes is on one side and no is on the other side. And if we get a no, that means that we're further away from yeses. What everybody needs to understand is that yes is a product of the no's. Like, no is on the path to yes. And so, like, if I said to one of your potential clients, you need to get 10 no's, for every 10 no's, you're going to enroll a new client. Like, think about that shift. People would be running out there trying to get no's every 5 seconds, because they'd be like, all I got to do is get 10 no's and I'm going to get a client. Like, it's, it totally shifts the perspective, because it's just like when we talk about the successful people and failure, no's, rejection is literally part of the game. And it's a big part of the game. And this is exactly what I fell into when I was first trying to grow my online business. I got 2 no's from people that I knew for my $3,000 fitness program. And I said, screw this. I'm going to go back to selling for $50 an hour to people that I kind of know. Right. And it was exactly that. And so, okay, how do we work through this? Well, okay, let's talk about this. You're going to have people who, if we look at our relationships as like circles of like, we have our inner circle of like our closest friends, our closest family members. This is what I would call our chosen family, right? Then we have our next circle. So our chosen family, they're never going to pay for anything. And frankly, they shouldn't, because they're like we would die for them. Like, we would offer any advice, whatever. Then we have our next level, which is like friends of friends, family of friends, friends of family, right? Who like know us, and like it's pretty, like a pretty close relationship, but like they're not, like, we wouldn't go for a beer with them. That's I would say our first layer of where we need to be looking. Okay. And those people, okay, like, you're either going to drift through the rest of your life with them as a Facebook friend, see that they have a family and they have a lake house, and they're going to see the same about you, and not really give a shit about it in any way. Or you're going to ask them to pay for something that is a service that's going to provide value, and either they're going to say yes or they're going to say no. If they say yes, great, you're going to help them and you're going to do everything you can. If they say no, you're probably going to go right back to the exact same thing that you were before, which is looking at their kids on Facebook, right? Like, and so I think that there's this like belief that it's going to be awkward, but like, let's look in reality, how many times are you physically going to see this person in the rest of your life? Maybe 2. So like, if it's awkward, like maybe it's going to be awkward 2 times, and we're willing to like not do that reach out and not potentially change someone's life because we're worried about a potential awkward thing at a high school reunion in 10 years. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think that trade-off's worth it. Right? So like, again, we need to think of these things logically, right? Like it's absolutely ridiculous to think that you're going to let that affect something else. Cause again, we're not talking about people we're going to see at every dinner party, every month. We're talking about people that we might see once every 2 to 5 years. And if they say no, they're probably going to forget about it. It's like, shoot your shot, man.
Huge perspective change, and it's also like you say as well. It's like if you're sensible with it as well, it's probably not going to be as awkward as you think. There's so much there.
Don't make it weird.
Gavin, one that I really would love to touch on, as I know you speak to and you coach big names and kind of like a lot of truly high performers. What's your perspective on happiness, and is that a myth? Like, can you optimize for happiness, or what are your thoughts on that? Because I find it's almost torn between like the content a lot of people would see online would be happiness is, there is no such thing as happiness when you're a business owner, and it's all about doing and being productive. So I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on that, kind of if you can optimize, I guess, for happiness and productivity and both sides of things. That's a really good question.
That's a really good question. I think it was Matthew McConaughey who has said like that. What does he say? But he says we shouldn't be chasing happiness. We should be chasing the feeling of joy. Like, we often think that happiness is this like feeling that we can get. And I believe, I'm trying to just kind of like make sense of it here. I believe that happiness is a choice. I believe that we choose that. We choose to show up in a certain way every day. Now, a feeling would be joy, right? So we can chase joy through doing things that we, and quite literally, enjoy. Joy is right in it, right? So again, we come back to, like you said, optimizing for it. Like, first of all, happiness is a choice, right? So we choose how we want to show up every day. It's a state of being. But joy is a feeling. And I think a lot of us start businesses because we want more joy. Like we said, joy and freedom are kind of like intertwined in many ways in a lot of people's heads. So, there are always going to be things that we have to do that we don't necessarily enjoy. But if we know that it's for the bigger picture and it's in pursuit of this joy, then we likely are going to be able to get out of our own way and do the thing, right? Because it's in pursuit of the joy. I think one thing that a lot of us wrongly think, and this kind of fallacy, is that at some point we'll be like done and we'll be like, okay, when I get this thing, I'll be happy. And that's what I mean by it's a choice. Like I had this long-standing belief that when I got to a certain amount of money, I could like put my feet up on the desk and be done. And like the fact is, and I think you're well aware of this, and I think a lot of hard workers are, you're done when you're dead. Like, we will never be done. Like, there will always be more that we can be chasing. So then if we're constantly chasing this thing that we, if we're constantly chasing this thing we think will come, we're probably just chasing death, because that's when we're like done, and then when we can kind of like rest, right? So like, why not make the choice that you're going to show up with that great attitude and that attitude of service and happiness, and then pursue activities and people and relationships that bring you joy. It's a delicate line. And I hope I did a good job of explaining it. Those were a really great question that I've never been asked that way before.
Amazing. And in the last segment as well, that more of a personal kind of chapter and more of a personal kind of question, but congrats on fatherhood and your recent.
Thank you.
Like how has that changed you? Has that changed you at all?
Oh, in every way. Yeah, my little guy Henry, as we're recording, is just under 6 months old. I could talk about him all day, so just stop me if you need to. No, the biggest thing that it has changed for me is, like, on a business perspective, like it's changed so much in that, like, everything, I'm just beyond excited to be his father, and he gives me so much drive, and brings me so much joy and so many positive things. But the biggest thing that it did was it forced me to, I call it, ask better questions. Okay. As I alluded to earlier, this like setting the rules of the game. One of the things I recognized when he was born was that I was straight up on too many Zoom calls last year, like just too many Zoom calls. And I'd finish work for the day and I'd go and hang with my wife, and I was a zombie. Like I was there physically, but I wasn't like there, right? I couldn't focus. I was just exhausted. So I was like, I need to, and then, we're bringing another human into this world. And my number one goal, again, values and vision drive every decision, is that I want to be a present husband and father. And presence doesn't mean just physical presence, like present, like I'm there. And so I was like, I need to define these rules of the game and ask better questions. And so the question that I came to was not just, how can I make X amount of money, which is always kind of like I said, it's always our measuring stick, but it was, how can I make X amount of money and be on less than 15 hours of Zoom calls a week? Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're asking better questions. Now we're setting better rules of the game, because every problem is solvable, and our brains are problem-solving machines. We just usually give them shitty problems to solve. Like, how do I make more money? Well, your brain is going to have a million different things going on, because there's so many fears of that, right? Oh, that means more clients. That means more team members. That means more stress. But what if you asked it, how do I make X amount of money without more clients, without more team members, and without more stress? Now your brain can go to work on solving that problem, which is, again, a way better problem to solve. So what he has done is he has allowed me to really open up this new vault of solving better problems. Like when you have a kid, your boundaries are forced upon you more so than when you don't, right? Everyone says set boundaries, be ruthless with your time. But like, man, before I had a kid and when I was single, like I just do whatever I wanted all the time. Right now it's like, no, like I want to be with him. So I need to absolutely hammer it before he wakes up. And then when he's in his naps, I need to absolutely hammer it. Like there are specific times when I need to be super focused, and other times when I want to like have my phone on the other side of the room. So I think that's been the biggest lesson from fatherhood that I think anybody can take, is like, ask better questions and you'll probably get better answers.
And that's a big takeaway for me as well, from a like just like purely from a logical decision. It's so easy, kind of from an egotistical perspective to be like, I want to make as much money as possible or have as much revenue, but then if you're not optimizing for anything else, or if you're not setting any other boundaries, what's the point of that?
Right.
You mentioned a couple things on that as well that I just wanted to very, very briefly touch on is your non-negotiables now have changed slightly. So there's no more, like, there's a max of 15 hours of Zoom calls per week. You work early on in the day before he wakes up. Like, what are your non-negotiables alongside that from both, I guess, personal, business, relationships?
Yeah. So on Fridays, I don't take calls anymore. So while I do like still work, we spend a lot of time together. And I was really honored last week. My wife said, I look forward to Fridays so much. And I was like, yes, like that's what it's all about. After 5 p.m., I block all my access to social media. So from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., I literally cannot access social media on my phone, which allows me to be more present with my son and with my wife. And then also in my early work hours of the day, I can't be wasting it on social media because I don't have access to it. Some other non-negotiables are just like, I've tried it. I try my best to avoid any evening meetings or evening work. First of all, I'm a mess because basically my brain shuts off. And second of all, I just like, it's not, the trade-off's not worth it for me. So I've really, and even with like friends, like getting together and things like that, like I'm really careful about, what I say yes to. So I guess, to be frank, I just say no to more, and I set more boundaries on like when and what I'm willing to do. Right. So, like there are certain times that, I could book a podcast, and like, unless it's like going to bring me a ton of money or it's going to bring me a ton of viewers or whatever, like I'm not going to go outside of what works for me.
I hear that. And then the last couple questions, as a quick fire, I'm kind of conscious of your time, is the last one I always love to wrap up on is, if you could almost rewind time a little bit, if you could go back and give one piece of advice to your younger self, think like, I don't know, if he's 17, 18, he's doing a hockey, he's juggling that side of things, what would be the one big piece of advice you'd give him?
I'd give him two. First of all, stop drinking. Stop drinking alcohol. It serves no purpose. And my God, I wasted so much money on alcohol. My wife and I will often talk about when we'd like had no money when we were single in our 20s and would spend like, I'm in Canada, so dollars, like $150 in one night on alcohol and cabs and stuff. And it's just like, if I had saved that, and I used to do that 1 or 2 times every weekend, right? If I had saved that, I would have like, man, how much money I would have saved up right now. So that'd be the first thing, is like, stop drinking, period. The second thing I would say is, and this is something I still kind of feel behind on at 37, is like, go learn high income skills. Learn how to persuade with your writing, like copywriting, and learn how to get people to take action on things that are in alignment with what they want, which is selling. Like, learn how to sell. If you can learn those things, you will never ever not have money, because you have skills that can translate into anything. Whether you want to be an electrician or a plumber or a salesperson or a business coach or just be a salesperson for a company, those things will always serve you. That's probably what I would say to my 17, 18-year-old self. Stop being an idiot, basically.
Amazing. And then where can people find you? I know you have one kind of webinar and masterclass coming up, which I think will be after this is posted.
Yeah, it's pretty quick coming up. So first of all, if you want to, what I'll do, Plowman, is I'll share the book link with you, and you can share with people. They can get it wherever they buy books, but like Amazon, whatever. So Consciouspreneur, What to Do When the Hard Work Stops Working. If you want to learn more about this stuff, go pick up that book. I put a lot of effort into my YouTube channel. I like the longer form like this. So go check me out on YouTube at Coach Gavin McHale. And then, of course, if you want the short form hits of those quick hits, you can go on Instagram at Gavin McHale1. I'm often on there chatting with people and things like that. So those are the best places to find me.
Amazing. I will have, if I'll find a link after for the book, and for the YouTube and Instagram I have anyway, but for the book, awesome. I'll find a link and I'll attach all of those below. Gavin, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. So many big takeaways here.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on.